Welcome to the second week of the ADHD GO webinar. This is the tools section of the course, and we will be helping you manage your symptoms and increase your chances of finding success in everything that you do, and the essential tools that you're going to need to help you do that. So your treatments, your tactics, and your tools are going to look different depending on what role you're doing. If you're at work, you're going to have different responsibilities and different distractions than if you were at home or if you were with your friends. The expectations change with the role. So I've got the four most common roles listed here, and you're going to need to think about how each of these tools will need to be adapted to fit into the role, and where and which ones will be more useful in those changing contexts. There are many other ways you could break this down. You can make it as complicated as you want. I sort of recommend focusing on those main four, but as I said, if it's useful for you, here are some other suggestions for types of roles that you might feel are very important and relevant in your life. Okay, so here are the essential tools. I break it down into 9 tools. We've already talked about things like attitude, treatment team, vision, and other experts like therapists and coaches. Those four are sort of the foundation, and these build on top of that. So the first one we're looking at is going to be obviously rituals and routines, and we'll follow the other 8 will follow after. So rituals and routines. The first thing to remember is not to expect habits. This is something that a lot of courses sort of preach, is it needs to become a habit. And that's true in that it needs to be done consistently. You need to reliably, you need to be able to rely on yourself to follow through with those rituals and routines all the time. But I think a habit gives us a false sense that it's going to be somehow an autopilot. It's not. Habits are something, like I said, it's something that you do reflexively without thinking about it. It's become that much of your behavior, like brushing your teeth. It would feel weird if you didn't do it, whereas routines are things that are actually easy to ignore. They're things that you make it a routine so that you don't forget it, despite the fact that you normally would if it wasn't a routine that you needed to expend effort to remember to follow through on. So expect the boring work of putting the effort in to remember a routine every day, not the autopilot and that sort of false sense of security you can get from thinking about habits. So the second one is routines like chores. So making all of your chores into routines and figuring out when is the best time to do those things. So that's why I've listed eat frogs first. And what that means is just if I have something that I really want to get out of the way, then in the routine of my day, I will put that thing first so that I get the really tough stuff out of the way when I have the most energy. Sort of after I've woken up and I'm feeling good and I'm starting my day, that's the time to usually attack those really odious tasks that you don't want to do, you sort of want to skip. So make your chores into routines, lay the steps out, and decide when those are going to live in your day. Rituals are routines that you elevate and give them a special significance. Some routines that you might make into rituals are meditation, exercise. You might even be able to find a way for diet, work, and fun to be given ritual preparation to some degree. And this can help you not only perform the task with greater care and maybe have a better result more consistently, but rituals can also remind you to do that task because you take the time to honor it and its significance in helping you live the life you want to live. So ways to make things into rituals could be purifying the space beforehand, doing a very consistent sort of routine. Like in Japanese tea ceremonies, they'll turn the teacup several times before drinking the tea, for instance. You could burn incense, or you could pick a meaningful time of the day, such as doing things when you wake up, or doing things just before you go to bed. If you consider the time of the day, that can give it a special significance while you're doing that, and just adhere to those same steps every time you do it. And this can be a way to elevate and improve some of your routines on their way to becoming habits. Next, we have brain fog, and this is just kind of a reiteration of what I said with eating your frogs first. This is when most people tend to have a time of the day where they start to slow down mentally a little bit, and they kind of have a lull in their ability to pay attention and engage at their peak. That's like and that's like a brain fog. So for instance, I tend to have a brain fog maybe early afternoon, just after I've eaten lunch, and I'm feeling a little more mellow, a little less able to deal with a lot of different distractions and stimuli. So this can be a good time to make the phone calls that I need to make, communicate with other people over a video chat or something of that nature, because those other people can hold you accountable, and also it's sometimes easier to engage and commit that focus when you have another person who's actively engaging you, rather than just work, which is more passive, that you have to put all the focus into that. So that can help you deal with brain fog, and just be aware that it's there, and you will start to find ways to use that time in your day to do things that are best for that kind of energy. So next, we have the most important one, which is check-ins. You should always be doing a morning and an evening check-in daily at the bare minimum. This is one of the most important routines, and therefore one of the most important tools. The rest of this is important, but this is definitely the main takeaway for routines, is to check in with yourself at the beginning of the day. Transfer everything that's on your calendar to your checklist of things that you plan to actually accomplish that day, and consider each of your roles and what kind of time you're committing to each of these roles, and how that reflects your values and really makes you feel excited to get the things done that are on your task list for that day. Then the evening check-in, or maybe check-out, you could call it. Sometimes I do. That's where you'll be reviewing your progress, maybe rewarding yourself with a little bit of, leisurely distraction, maybe some video games, watch a movie, something like that. And then you'll also be updating your calendar based on anything that came up throughout your day. And maybe before you go to bed, make a quick entry in your notebook, just checking in with yourself emotionally, or on your overall progress, that sort of thing. So check in and check out. Set a time to do that first thing in the morning, and last thing you do before you go to sleep, or right around there. And that's really going to help. That's going to be the most powerful routine for changing your life that you can possibly put into your day. Okay, a calendar. So obviously this is one of the scariest things for atypicals, or in my experience it certainly is. Keeping track of what's coming in the future is going to be, it's impossible to just keep it in your head. So you need a tool, you need the calendar. But deadlines are very difficult when we kind of have that present tunnel vision focus just on the now. And so, except for as something to worry about vaguely, future events don't exactly exist to us per se. So, deadlines are vague, the future is vague, makes it hard to complete projects, especially on a time schedule that everybody else can agree with and gets clearly communicated to them. That's one of the biggest things, is to do anything outside of yourself, you need to work with other people. And that requires scheduling and for them to understand what's going on. It's that communication step. So you need to have a clear plan so that you can communicate with other people, so that you can make projects that aren't just you hanging out, you know, in your bedroom, building Lego blocks, doing whatever it is, you know, playing Minecraft. That's all cool, but to really have an impact on the world and really feel fulfilled, all that is going to require some level of connection and communicating when things are going to be done, so that you can have collaborations with other people to some degree. So you are going to want to schedule your routines. Anything that's recurring, I think of chores. I made an ideal day plan, you know, where I blocked out all of my routines, the obligations that I knew would come up on a standard day. Then you're going to want to put in your obligations, so those special things like doctor's appointments that they're not coming up every week, but or maybe they are, you know, depending on your circumstance, but these are things that you need to schedule specially because they don't come up often. Then scheduling fun. Scheduling fun is arguably what you should do first before doing everything else. Maybe, you know, before your routines. Think about what you want to do to keep yourself sane this week, this quarter, and this year. You know, maybe make them progressively more grandiose. But whatever you want to do, scheduling fun first prioritizes it in your mind and on the calendar, and it reminds you of why you're doing any of this, like boring, hard stuff, because you also get to have some fun and you get to look forward to those things, and you also take steps toward self-fulfillment. Okay, when you're scheduling deadlines, you're going to want to choose the projects that are coming up in the next quarter and set those on the calendar, set the deadlines for completing those projects. Then write down all the tasks that will be required to call that project done on that deadline event date. Now take those tasks and begin to move backward in time on your calendar towards the present date and start setting down those tasks that make up the complete project on different sort of monthly milestones, things that you're going to have finished in order to get to that deadline. Then you can take those monthly milestones and see, okay, what are these smaller chunks of the project composed of? What tasks need to be done to finish those? And that's what's going to go on your daily checklist that's a product of your morning check-in. So that's how you're going to set up your bigger project deadlines and the sort of life goals that you want to accomplish. I call them destinations because I sort of feel like we're in motion towards our best possible destinations, and so that's how I think about those sort of life goals. Milestones are things that come up monthly or quarterly that are big accomplishments toward completing that project. Then goals are what I want to have done this week in order to get closer to that milestone, and tasks are what you do every day to accomplish those things. So those are the basics of setting up your calendar. A couple other useful tips: color code your calendar by your role. That can be really helpful so that you're not getting your work obligations confused with your home obligations, and not sort of mentally intertwining those in any way, which can just kind of get you riled up emotionally and make it hard to relax when you're not at work, for instance. Maybe get two separate calendars. I use paper and analog for this as well. I like to have as many reminders as possible to use my calendar. Again, plan fun first, and also not just fun, but relaxation, because it's different. Relaxation is when you're literally not doing anything. Even reading a book is not relaxing. It's reading a book. Relaxing is laying in the sun, or having a little rest and not really stimulating yourself in any way, and that's different than fun. So make sure that that also gets an honored place in your calendar. All right, let's move on to our next one, checklist. We just talked about this a little bit, in that you're going to be taking your daily tasks that are coming up the next day and breaking those down as much as possible and putting those onto a checklist during your morning check-in, which should be one of your important routines. Your checklist is a checklist for the day, so go ahead and date that list. And you're going to also want to have a checklist potentially for each of your roles. I like to have multiple little notebooks, and again, this can be a little bit overwhelming for some atypicals, and yes, I do occasionally leave my notebooks places where they shouldn't be and get notebooks confused, but it does make sure that I always have a notebook close to hand, and if I put the date on it, I can't get them confused, and I can sync up those lists later, even if I make multiple lists in each room of my house. Those will all eventually come together because I have a system for that. So prioritize those tasks that you're going to be doing by their urgency and then their importance. So do the most urgent and most important thing first, and estimate how long it's going to take. Don't put anything on your task list for the day that's going to take over about 25 minutes, or make sure that you consciously take a break when you're working on such a long stretch of whatever that task is. You know, it's nice to keep things nimble, keep us switching, and hyperfocus can also be good, but it's important to remain aware of it. So try to keep those tasks on your checklists down to 25 minutes. Again, keep a digital copy and or a small notebook that travels with you everywhere. If you foresee any kind of time crunch on your checklist, also make sure to remove some items so you're not experiencing a lot of stress from having to do too much and not getting it done. Those feelings of failure and stress are just going to slow you down and make you feel bad, and none of that's useful. And then I would say either check off or even highlight completed tasks on your checklist. Highlighting them is nice because, you know, erasing them makes it easy to forget what you've accomplished. So highlighting the task or just doing a strike through or something, a check mark's next to it, one of those is better, and it's going to be better to revisit that and reward yourself at your evening checkout when you look back at all you've done and you want to connect emotionally with that feeling of pride and relief at the end of the day. All right, so that pretty much covers checklists. Yeah, you can have a checklist for a task, a specific task as well, if it's going to be a more involved thing. So you could even make that a subsection of your daily checklist. Let's go on to treatment notebook. As I was just mentioning, you'll be reflecting on the tasks that you've accomplished, and you're going to want to clarify those thoughts and think about the nature of your progress. What went well? What could have gone better? What were the kind of negative recurring patterns of thought that held you back or derailed you emotionally while you were going about your day trying to accomplish things? You're going to want to reflect on those, clarify your thoughts, and review your progress in a positive way at your evening check-ins, and that's where you'll be writing that in your treatment notebook. Keep your treatment notebook in the same place always, a place that's visible and next to a pen. I do recommend just using pen and paper for this because you don't want to be waking up and using your phone for this right when you're trying to go to bed or in the middle of the night when you can't sleep. You don't want to always be going to your phone, especially because it's a light source. And in the bedroom, for better sleep habits, that's something that we want to diminish as much as possible. There are 3 types of check-ins that can go in a notebook. What we've just talked about is the daily check-in, which I'm going to call the evening check-in, where you clarify your thoughts and evaluate your progress in a positive way. But let's start at the bottom with annual check-ins. At your annual check-ins, you can put this in the front of your notebook, by the way. You're going to be really evaluating your values as a whole, reassessing those, making sure they resonate with you. Your future vision statement will be updated given what you've experienced in the last year. Your life goals can be evaluated, and also any positive mantras that have really resonated with you. Stepping back then to the quarterly check-ins, this is where you're going to put down your milestones for the coming quarter, your milestone goals. Any kind of lists that you need to update, be that grocery lists, auto maintenance lists, public transportation lists, anything that doesn't change very often. You're going to want maybe the second page of your notebook to be about your quarterly check-in, and then everything else in your notebook, every other page, is going to be dedicated to those evening check-ins. So that pretty much covers your notebook. Other things that you could put in there are notes about dreams, recurring dreams that you're having, and also I find this to be a great place to put down therapy notes that I want to reflect on later. So that's your treatment notebook. Keep it in the same place near a pen so it's always handy. Next up, let's talk about timer and alarms. I use an egg timer that looks like this, and it has a bell and it ticks. That's great for most things. It reminds me of the passing of time. It is wonderful because I can put a sticky note on it that reminds me of the task that I'm doing, maybe even a little notes about what I need to work on next and things I need to consider. That can go right on the timer, so I never forget what I'm doing. Every time I look up, it's there. This can be a little bit annoying for some tasks, and sometimes, when I'm out, obviously I don't take the timer with me, so using your cell phone for that is also great. But again, it does get you to pick up your cell phone and look at your cell phone, and then you can take your thoughts pretty much anywhere very quickly. So I do like the egg timer again. It's a nice analog tool. And it's a great way to do Pomodoro sprints. Pomodoros is this concept that everything is chunked down to a small sprint of work. So you don't have to maintain effort for the entirety of a task or a project. You just go for 20 minutes and take a 3 to 5 minute break and complete your work in those smaller sprints. So timers are great for that. The concept of Pomodoros is also a good reminder that for atypicals, it can be important to clearly understand that things have a start and end. Because we don't visualize the future well or conceptualize it very well, we tend to get really anxious during conversations and things that don't have a designated end time because it feels like maybe they'll never end. So it can be really important to bookend tasks with a start time and an end time, or even think about conversations that you're having that way. Just remember that things will end, and there's a little progress bar on everything that's happening to you, with a series of skill checks in between the start of the progress bar and the end of the progress bar. So that can help us really ease a lot of anxiety that things are just going to be interminable, and we will be stuck in sort of a Groundhog's Day loop of whatever is happening to us in the moment. And this happens a lot during conversations. And another thing to think about when you're getting a clock for your office or your bedroom, it's a lot easier to visualize the passage of time with an analog clock like this, because you can see the hands moving around the pie, and you can tell that there's less pie left as the hands move like a big Pac-Man mouth. And that's really useful because when you're just seeing numbers, that's another level of abstraction. Like with a digital clock, when you just see those numbers, it's hard to tell that there's less time sort of left in the day. It's just giving you a statement of sort of where we are in like coordinates, rather than this, which gets your mind thinking about how much is left of this pie. Use alarms to set limits for things. This is a way to combat the negative effects of hyperfocus, and also train yourself to remember that tasks can be broken up over multiple periods of time, even a long term, even a long length of time, because we tend to hyperfocus on things and want to finish them in the present moment because we can only really emotionally connect to the now. So this is a way to practice switching tasks and being more comfortable doing so. All right. Next up, let's talk about the launch pad. Okay. Your launch pad is an altar of important things. Keys, wallet, phone, lists, maybe mask, water bottle, flashlights. Those things should all be in some kind of a little table or basket or hooks next to your front door. It's a visual cue to remind yourself to give everything a once over, to pause, to remember what you're doing, and to get yourself prepared before stepping out the door and doing awesome at whatever it is that you are headed to. But just remember to do a visual sweep. This can be a really great way to make sure that the oven's not on before you leave the house, or something that happens all too commonly. So use it as a reminder to slow down, get everything you need, and remember where you're going and why. Next up, visual cues. What are visual cues and why do we use them? How do we use them? So visual cues are the stimuli that remind you to do any behavior, any pattern of behavior. So for example, you might come home and you see the light on the front porch or a chair on the front porch, and this reminds you of smoking cigarettes, so you have a cigarette. And it'll trigger that behavior just seeing that place where you always have a cigarette. So you need to learn to see the links between those visual stimuli and those visual cues and your behavior, so that you can start to transition to more beneficial loops consciously, or intentional loops at least. So you're going to want to increase the number of positive visual cues in your environment and diminish the number of negative cues as you identify visual stimuli that are associated with negative behavior patterns. So put up positive mantras around your home, any important lists and calendars. Put all those visual cues to remember to do things in prominent places. Make sure that those cues are big and colorful. They should look fun and engaging. Switch it up as often as you need to. And another great visual cue is using dry erase markers on things like windshields, windows, mirrors. You can also have a dry erase board. I find it really useful so that I'm not constantly going through sticky notes for things that I just need to put down real quick and then scratch off as I get to it. So visual cues, increase the positive ones, and there'll be less room for negative ones as you identify those. Next up, we will talk about crossroads moments. These are critical junctures where often it'll start with some kind of a visual cue, and you will have the opportunity to engage in a repetitive pattern of behavior, a sort of familiar pattern of behavior. It's like when you're watching a movie and you know exactly what's going to happen in the scene because you've seen a movie like this before. So when you start to feel like, oh, I've seen this scene before, then think about what is the benefit of the action I'm about to take. And that can be a huge, that can release a lot of the pressure on you to make for what kind of decision you're going to make. It can really clarify things to say, what's the benefit here of this behavior that I'm about to engage in? And if you can do that before taking the action, then you've used a crossroad moment and decided to go, down a more beneficial loop. If you can't avoid certain triggers, then and you have trouble making a better decision, at least try to delay your bad choice. So plan like a little distraction, sing a little song, do some push-ups, just put off the bad choice a little bit. Remind yourself of any mantras even that help you forgive yourself and also hold yourself accountable at the same time. Which can be a tough circle to square a little bit. Next, write down some facts about the situation, which might help you make a more rational decision. Writing down facts can make it easier to make the right choice in a crossroad moment. And again, don't punish yourself when you've made the same old familiar mistake. Just get back on track and commit to doing better next time, because stress and a sense of shame at your failure is just going to be detrimental. Okay, rewards and consequences are two sides of the same coin, but some people are more powerfully motivated by rewards and some people by consequences or punishments. Choose whatever works for you and roll with it. It's probably going to be a combination of both to some extent, but just remember that you can love yourself and improve yourself at the same time. It doesn't need to be, you never need to be bullying yourself, even when you set up punishments for when you don't follow through on something you said you would. Rewards can be something you currently do and enjoy that you want to do more of. Maybe playing a mobile game. You could set yourself another 15 to 30 minutes of doing that each day after you've accomplished a big task. Things you would like to do or have but don't. This could be aspirational, like a vacation, and then or buying something, a juicer in my case. Things you don't enjoy and would like to have taken away. So maybe there's an obligation or a chore that you normally do, and you can get out of doing that for the week or whatever as a reward to yourself for following through. Something that's obviously not going to be harmful to yourself or others that you're skipping there, but you'll figure something out. And then consequences are just the flip side of that. Getting back to what I said about using a mobile game, that's normally a distraction, but distractions actually make great rewards. So use distractions as rewards because those are things that you're already interested in doing more of. So then before you do indulge in a distraction, make sure that you ask yourself again, what am I rewarding myself for? And if there's not something to be rewarding yourself for, maybe don't take that time to indulge in that distraction or that form of reward. Tie it to something that's really going to make a meaningful difference in your life. And then finally, make good behavior frictionless and add friction to bad behavior. So if you are mobile gaming too much, maybe you add an extra step by setting up a password for that game. So it's just a little bit more friction, or you set a screen time limit, something that can make it a little more difficult to actually do that thing. And making good behavior frictionless, maybe you keep your exercise equipment out so it's easy to go straight from, writing a report to doing 10 pull-ups when you either want to reward yourself or want to give yourself some kind of punishment or consequence. Just make sure that the good behavior is right there at your fingertips. Next, let's just recap a few pointers about your treatment tools. First, think creatively about how you can establish consistency with these tools. You will be using all of these tools every day for the rest of your life. So however it works best for you and you remember to do these things and really put effort into doing them well or using them well, And anything that you can do to increase that consistency is going to be critical to changing these routines into habits. If you do forget to use your tools, try making a checklist for your tools even until they become habitual. This can be a great part of your routine at your check-in and check-out. Just give yourself a checklist of, okay, have I set my timers and alarms? Do I have those ready? Do I have my checklist? Do I have my calendar all filled out? Just have a checklist just for the tools. This is definitely going to require resilience, and you will continue to fail. Even when you are 100 years old, you will still fail to use these tools effectively sometimes. But remember, build resilience by reminding yourself of what you did right and challenging negative thoughts. Finally, avoid a false sense of accomplishment from collecting tools but not using them. We can often feel like preparing, buying calendars, buying timers, doing research, all those things, we can feel like we're doing something and pat ourselves on the back, but it's using the tools that really is going to make a difference. Collecting tools, just don't let it give you a false sense of accomplishment. And finally, monitor your use of the tools and determine how you could adapt to use them more often. So, make yourself notes in your treatment notebook about where you're finding stumbling blocks with the tools you're using, and any lessons you might learn that are transferable to other tools or life roles. All right, that completes the ADHD Tools webinar content. So let's just get your questions about the ADHD Tools segment, and anything else that's on your mind. We'll go for probably a little bit longer than usual as we talk about this, so feel free to put your questions in the chat, and I will begin with some of the questions that were sent to me beforehand at our email address, questions@adhdgo.com.